Grime was one of the last games I played last year. Having no prior knowledge about the game, it surprised me through its amazing level design and satisfying exploration. I was so impressed by it that in my almost 18-minute long review of the game, which unintentionally turned into a love letter instead, I only had two nitpicky minor negatives to say about it. Link to the video is in the description. Anyway, right after finishing Grime, I learned that a sequel had already been announced, so my anticipation was like, did Grime II meet my expectations? Yes, a resounding yes. But having played the first game already and the familiarity factor that comes with it, I played Grime II with a little more critical eye, and I have some thoughts. While I think it is as much a masterpiece as the first game, and it's a very easy recommendation for anyone even remotely interested in metroidvanias, I think the game is somewhat bogged down by its own scale. Simply put, the game is too large and too long, which does a little bit of disservice to it. But before talking about it, I have to highlight some of the great things this sequel achieves. For example, the already great combat from the first game has been refined and made better in every possible way in Grime II. Whereas the first game had a stamina mechanism similar to most Souls-likes, Grime II did away with that and replaced it with a force meter. On the surface, it kind of works like a stamina meter, as in whenever you swing your weapon or dash or jump, you eat up parts of it, which quickly gets replenished if you are not doing any of those. But unlike a stamina meter, this does not stop you from doing any of those things even if the meter is fully depleted. Rather, how depleted the meter is simply determines how strong your attacks are. If the meter is lower than this threshold, then you'll cause significantly less damage to an enemy. Therefore, you are incentivized to keep it above the limit during combat. This works much better than a stamina system because, unlike the stamina system, it gives you the freedom to choose. You can play like a tank, slow and deliberate while maintaining the force meter above the threshold, or you can play like a bicycle, prioritizing speed and repeated flailing over damage per strike. Totally up to you. I thought this change was a masterstroke as it makes combat more accessible for people who might have hesitated to play the first game because they don't like stamina-based combat or how that inherently forces you to play slowly. The game lets you further refine your choice of combat speed by giving you choices of weapons that are clearly labeled as very fast, average, slow, and very slow. On top of that, you can jump, dash, parry, and grasp that make combat feel super fluid and responsive no matter what kind of speed you choose. Together with the visual flair and crunchy, heavy-hitting sound design, combat in Grime II is one of the best, most satisfying combat systems in any 2D Metroidvania currently available. One issue I had with the previous game, however, remains in the sequel, and that is the lack of incentive to try out different weapons. I started the game with this one-handed axe made from solidified Mountain Dew, just like everyone else. Then very soon I found this heavy weapon made out of 2 stone hands, I think, and although it is of the very slow category, the large difference in damage between this and the relatively faster axe made me compelled to go with this weapon, as I generally prefer more damage per strike over speed. But then firstly, I didn't get any weapon even remotely comparable to its damage output for a very long time, and even when I got to the city and found vendors who sell weapons, none of them seemed worth buying simply because of their meager damage output. As I kept playing and finding weapons, their starting damage was so much lower than my two-handed boulder that I just didn't see any reason to even try them out. It even applies to the weapons of the same category as the one I was using. Of course, the more I kept upgrading my weapon, the damage gap between it and any new weapon I found kept getting bigger. The fact that every upgrade increases a very small amount of damage didn't give me any confidence to use up my limited upgrade resources on a weapon whose base damage is incomparably low in hope that upgrading it a few times might bring it even remotely close to the weapon I was already using. So I ended up playing the whole game with this one weapon. Yes, the game does give you options to try things out by allowing you to respec your stats so that you can change your character's build and go for a faster weapon, for example, but because the combat is so engaging, I developed a sort of muscle memory with my slower weapon and kind of internalized its timing, etc. So even from a mechanical or weapon feel point of view, I just didn't feel incentivized to try anything else. I think a compelling way to make me go out of my way to try out different weapons would have been to make their base damage relatively comparable to the base damage of literally the second weapon you get in the game. Only around the end of the game, I found this weapon, and simply because I had fully upgraded my main one and had a lot of spare upgrade resources by then, I upgraded this one a few tiers to make the benefit of its faster speed be an intriguing case for adopting it as my main. But again, by then I was almost at the end of the game and I just didn't feel like learning and getting used to the timing of another new weapon. Maybe it's just a me thing, but I had the same issue with the first game, and I just want to say that the second game, for me at least, didn't do anything new in this department. But, like I keep saying, combat is extremely fun. The fact that I could finish the whole game with one weapon is a great testament for the balance tuning of the combat system. Besides your main weapon, you can use molds, which are these clones of enemies you kill that you can summon like a secondary attack by consuming paint. If you played Ender Lilies or Ender Magnolia, this might feel somewhat remotely similar. Although I didn't use molds very much, and you can absolutely finish the whole game without engaging with it, which again proves the quality of combat balancing. Similarly, there is a parry mechanic just like the previous game, and after having played some great metroidvanias with parry mechanics over the last few months, I would say GRIME II has the best parry feel of all of them. Sure, games like Nine Souls have great parries, they feel snappy and precise, but the time slowing effect, the hand coming out of the player to stop the enemy like
talk to the hand,
and the thick sound effect make every parry feel like an event, and it never ever gets old. Parry timing is generous enough by itself, which can be further enhanced by the armor you put on, so even if you're not very good at parrying, you can still do it quite easily. Most importantly, you would have a lot of fun doing it. But even then, if you for some reason just don't want to parry, the combat system allows that too. Pretty much in every case, instead of parrying, you can choose to dash and utilize its iframes to evade damage. The dash can also be used as an attack to stagger enemies when there's this green circle around them, effectively making it work like a parry. Again, the absolute flexibility and freedom of this combat system in full display. Platforming is as great as the first game, only this time there's a lot more unique platforming mechanics. Although the pull feature was in the first game as well, this time, called Grasp, its use has been expanded, and by literally giving it to you as the first ability you unlock, the game signals its importance loud and clear. While similar grappling hooks exist in other games, GRIME II, in my opinion, perfects it. You feel a sense of power when you pull these big structures or break through these spiky bits, or even when you transform into condensed milk and traverse through tiny thin crevices like a liquid ninja. As you keep unlocking more traversal abilities, platforming gets more complex and exciting. However, I do think the game kind of hits the highest ceiling in terms of how many traversal abilities a game should have before they become too many to manage. While platforming in GRIME II remains fun throughout, in some late game areas, the juggling act of using this many different abilities in a long traversal challenge could get slightly overwhelming. Speaking of overwhelming, the one major gripe I have with the game is that, as I stated at the beginning of the video, the game is too large and too long for its own good. At the time of writing, I spent 37 hours in the game. I tried to see as much of the map as I could and didn't deliberately skip any part. Even after defeating the final boss, I spent another 3 hours as of now wandering around clearing as much of the map as I could. Yet the achievement list tells me that I still haven't discovered all the surrogates, which are checkpoints in the game, meaning I must have missed out on discovering at least one more area in this already vast map. The size of the map is not necessarily the issue. A game like this would almost always have post-game content for the completionists, and that's obviously fine, but in my experience, the first about 40% of my playthrough had tight pacing and a sense of progress and momentum. But then, when the inevitable classic metroidvania go to these 3 places marked in undiscovered areas of the map and bring these 3 pieces of MacGuffin part begins, the game's pacing becomes extremely tedious. You go through area after area which follows a similar pattern of unlocking a checkpoint, then unsealing the map so you can see it, followed by unsealing the warp so you can warp to this area's checkpoints later. This idea of 3 essential unlocks in a given area feels interesting in the beginning, since it gives you a sort of micro objective in each area. But in the mid-game, simply because of how much of it you constantly have to do, it loses its charm and feels like it's harming your momentum. While visually each area has its distinct identity, but of course at the end of the day, just like any game, this one too is limited by its own mechanics for the devs to design truly unique level layouts or combat scenarios or traversal puzzles. And because of how much level there is in this game, as the player, you start to see the level design falling into a predictable pattern and hitting its creative limits, which for me made it a slog after the first 40% to around 75% of my playtime, after which the pacing starts getting getting better again. One other thing, and this might just be a matter of my own personal taste, I didn't like how the game gives you new abilities. The rate at which you get new abilities, the pacing of it, is not well done at all, which is only exasperated by the aforementioned sloggy mid-game. You spend hours and hours clearing areas, killing not only mini-bosses but also main bosses, but without gaining new abilities. That is because in this game, killing bosses gives you health upgrades, paint and force upgrades, and other enhancements to your existing abilities, but the new abilities that will let you access new areas and fundamentally change how you play the game from that point forward are given to you kind of unceremoniously by making you bump into them while you're just trying to clear the map. This not only takes away the joy of finding a new ability, but also takes away the excitement, anticipation, and drive you felt in the first game when you were trying to kill a main boss knowing that a new ability is coming. Sure, granting new abilities by making you kill a boss is not the only rewarding way to do it. For example, in games like Mio Memories in Orbit, the level design often teases you by showing you an area where an ability upgrade is ready for you to pick up, which makes you look forward to getting it and also works as a great motivation to cross whatever hurdle you need to cross in order to reach there. In GRIME II, no such teasing or anticipation is provided. Pretty much every new ability you get is something you just unexpectedly bump into, and it's just not fun. But after all is said and done, GRIME II, much like GRIME I, is a blast to play. I'm already hooked to this franchise, and while I'm not sure how further a potential GRIME III could take things, I have grown a massive trust on the developers of this game for delivering two masterpieces back to back and proving that they know how to develop really fun games. You don't have to have played the first game to enjoy it. I didn't care about the story of either games, and even though the sequel has more dialogues and more elaborate of a narrative as far as I can tell, I can say for sure that GRIME II stands on its own as an amazing metroidvania that anyone with even a shred of interest in the genre must play.